There's a lot to talk about, so we're gonna start first with you, Frederic. You are for the Charter of Values, and so I want you to, in your own words, explain to me why you think that this is something that Quebec needs and why Montreal needs this.
Well, I think you got to separate the church from the affair of the state. Quebec, if you think of it in the historical perspective, the Catholic Church, the Catholic clergy had been running the schools, the hospitals, several social institutions. The clergy had been playing a role in politics. People were very much influenced by this, and Quebecers moved to something else, starting in the 1960s with the Quiet Revolution. Mm-hmm. And they came to the conclusion that religion is something private, something potentially divisive, and that so you practice it in your own private life and in the private sphere. Mm-hmm. And I think that today, reintroducing religion in the public sphere through religion of the minority groups would be a mistake. It would be counter or opposite to what Quebecers had been doing for, let's say, the last few decades.
We should say that these are your views and not the views of Dawson College. I just was reminded to say that. But
I can assure you that these are not the views of Dawson College.
So Fariha, I saw you reacting to what Frederic was saying. So, you know, you're obviously against this charter. You've had some difficult experiences since the talk of the charter has begun. So you believe that this is not positive. This is dangerous for this province.
Absolutely, I believe that it's divisive. It's very discriminatory and it's intolerant, and more so, it's turned religious minorities in Quebec into second-class citizens. Mm-hmm. And essentially, it's discrimination, it's intolerant, it's something that our government should not be preaching to the people.
And Frederic, I have to ask you this. You talked about the separation of church and state.
Yeah.
But doesn't that go both ways? Isn't the state now telling people how to practice their religion? I mean, that notion of church and state was set up to separate those two things in both directions.
The state is not telling anyone how to practice their religion. Fariha was mentioning discrimination. At the Commission Scolaire de la Pointe de l'Île now, if you're a Muslim or from certain religious minorities, you can get extra paid holidays, for instance. So to me, the way things are going on now is the end of equality under the law. We're not all equal because certain people, in the name of religious rights, can get certain advantages that other people cannot get. So to me, that would be something that is discrimination.
You feel that that's discrimination, and you feel that
I
is
would
what?
much rather be able to practice my faith and be a visible Muslim than get an extra paid holiday.
Absolutely. And we're going to continue to talk about this, but you had several incidents happen to you. If you want to quickly remind people about what's been going on.
Well, I'm born and raised in Quebec, and I had never experienced any sort of discrimination or anything negative because of my faith. And unfortunately, I took my daughter to the movies with some of her friends, and I was called a terrorist in the middle of a crowded theater on a Saturday afternoon. In the West Island of Montreal, and that's something that I would never have imagined.
And that's what we'll be getting to, because you guys are sticking around. We'll be talking about consequences, what you hope the charter will bring into Quebec, and you're afraid of what this will bring into this province. And this is where the debate occurs about the intended consequences. And so we are going to ask you guys to stay right here, because we're going to get back to you in just a little bit. So before the break, we got into these conversations about the for and the against. Let's talk about consequences now, okay? We're going to start with you, Fariha. What are your fears about the consequences of this charter if it is passed into law? I mean, we've talked about you being harassed.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've been harassed, and I'm not the only one. The statistics collected by the Muslim Council of Montreal, the last quarter of 2013, incidents against Muslim women in Quebec rose by 300% compared to the first 9 months of the year. That's significant.
Yeah.
And I've got a young daughter, and if my daughter grows up and she chooses to wear the hijab and live in Quebec, I have the responsibility of telling my daughter that she can't be a teacher or a doctor. And how is that democratic? How is that allowed and acceptable in this day and age?
So let's get to that, Frederic. I mean, you were hoping that this will make things more just and more fair.
Yeah,
but when you hear something like this, it must make you react somehow.
Well, actually, there is no right that is absolute. If you're actually convinced conservative and you want to show your political affiliation and you're a civil servant, you're not allowed to do this. This is a limit to your freedom of expression. When you work for the state, you don't express your political views, and I think you shouldn't express your religious views. It's a very, very special and fundamental view that you share only with the members of your community.
But,
when
yeah.
you work for the state, you work for the entire population. So you don't advertise, you don't do proselytizing in the workplace.
But you
common
talked about a
sense.
right. It is entrenched in our Constitution that you do have the right to practice, a right of freedom of religion. So how does that all play
There is a
together?
limit to every right. It is entrenched in our Constitution that you have the right to freedom of expression. Nonetheless, if you were to be hired as a civil servant for a government in Quebec or in Ottawa, you wouldn't be able to wear a badge saying that you're I don't know, a conservative, a liberal, NDP, because you're a civil servant. You're not allowed to do this. So there is always a limit to any religious right or rights in the Constitution. A limitless society in terms of rights would be chaotic. There would be no limit, no coherence, no common rules. And so this is what the problem is now.
So I'll let you respond to that. Did you feel like we were going on a chaotic path? I mean, you hear this and
Absolutely not. I think it's ludicrous, to be honest. I mean, with all due respect, you can't equate political rights and religious rights. They're very different. And like you mentioned, Joanna, it's entrenched in our Constitution, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. And furthermore, what it does is it actually turns religious minorities in Quebec into second-class citizens.
I want to get Frederic to respond to that. You know what people are saying, that this in essence is allowing the Quebec government to turn Quebec into a homogenized white French-speaking province.
Oh, come on.
This
Imagine white, homogeneous province.
I'm simply saying what people are
this
saying.
has nothing to do with color. This is completely a bad faith and cheap accusation. And by the way, I was saying that religious rights also have a limit, and they should have. If you try to board a plane with a kirpan, the famous knives of the Sikh, you're not allowed to do this. You will be prevented from boarding that plane. So every right, no matter if even a religious right, there is always a limit to a right. So in this case, the government has decided that a certain number of things that had been taking place or that were common and accepted practice.
But let's talk about the government. The government right now is giving this audience, right? So they're listening to what people have to say. People like you. Some people are saying that this is a fait accompli and that they're listening, but as Mr. Drainville said, they're firm. So how do you feel about these public hearings?
Well, I'm really hoping there's going to be a due democratic process, but I am concerned. I do have my concerns when Mr. Drainville is saying that he's set on the religious dress code that he has in mind. That's very intimidating for people like myself or the religious minorities of Quebec to hear a provincial minister say that he's set in his ways and he's gonna hear everybody, but what he wants to do is set. How is that democratic?
Okay, so obviously there's a lot of this is what I feel is going on here, which is great. It's conversation, but it's also palpable tension. So you talk about religion being divisive. Do you not feel that this is also divisive? This need to what's happening?
Well, because Johan, perhaps you feel that the way things are going on now is not divisive. For instance, separate bathing times hours for public swimming pools in Côte des Neiges for men and for women. So perhaps you feel that this
What I
is a
feel
way.
doesn't matter. I'm asking the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, if you think, or if anyone believes that this is really a way to unite our society and not to play it divisive, I think that separate bathing times in a public swimming pool here in Montreal is something completely unacceptable, and many people are getting very frustrated about this.
We're not talking about swimming times, and we're not talking about kirpans. We're talking about pieces of cloth, a hijab, a kippah, and a turban. Those are pieces of cloth. But it's going against the fabric of our society, which is to preach tolerance. Where is that role of the government? This is giving people who believe in the Charter, it's making it allowable for them to speak out against religious minorities. And people like myself who are born here, it's turning us into second-class citizens.
We can keep talking about this, I'm telling you, all day and all night, and we would love to have you guys back to continue this discussion, but we've got to end it here. Thank you so much. I think the most important thing in all of this is to continue these types of discussions, because that's, I think, where we will find some sort of a common ground, I hope. Thank you very much to both of you, Fariha, Naqvi-Mohamed, and Frederic Bastien. Thank you for waking up this early and for tackling this very difficult issue.